Well, nowadays, when we see Roy Keane, he's normally in a television studio. One thing he's not short of is an opinion. But what's he like as a person? What's he like when it comes to the younger players and helping them along? And also, delighted to say, with Danny Higginbotham joining us, what is he like as a manager and how had he changed? Let's start, Danny, with your time at Manchester United, coming through the academy, your experiences of what Roy Keane was like with the youngsters at the club.
In my opinion, and I'll give a story in a second, he was absolutely brilliant. He didn't suffer fools. I think he respected the younger players if they were trying to do the right thing. If they got a little bit above their station, then he would be the first one to tell them. When I joined at the time as an apprentice, I was quite fortunate because they had some world-class players, but they also had the younger players that were coming through, the likes of Beckhams, the Scholes, the Butts, the Nevilles. So you could actually chat with them about the position that they'd found themselves in being apprentices not so long ago. So they just gave you, that little bit of help and advice. But as for Roy Keane, I used to clean his boots when I was an apprentice, and it was something that I loved. I used to go home afterwards and tell my mates that, I'd been cleaning Roy Keane's boots. And he used to give me his old boots. So when I first became an apprentice at United, he was sponsored by High-Tech. And then I used to get his old High-Tech boots. And then he went to Diodora. And he did exactly the same thing with Diodora boots as well. He would give me his older boots that he hadn't probably worn that much. And I actually made my debut in his boots for Manchester United. But there was one particular afternoon where I didn't know what to expect. We used to train at the Cliff, but in the afternoons at times we'd go over and we'd have to drive over to Littleton Road, which was another part of the training ground. So I came back after training, and Jonathan Greening, who went on to have a really good career in the Premier League as well, he was waiting for me. And he said, have you seen Roy? And I was like, no, why? What's the problem? He said, he's absolutely fuming with you. And I was like, oh no, this cannot be the case. I was like, why? I said, what is the problem? And he said, well, you know that he gives you his Diodora boots? I was like, yeah. He said, well, he's came in here fuming because he said that somebody on your behalf has rung Diodora to try and get a boot deal. And at that time, agents weren't necessarily looked upon fondly, in particular for younger players, because we had everything that we needed at United. And I was just taken aback because I had no idea where this had come from. So I've got into my car and I'm driving home and I'm having all these thoughts going through my head. I'm thinking, I don't want to turn up at the Cliff tomorrow, having had a full afternoon, full evening of thinking about this, and then having to go and deal with the anger from Roy, and quite rightly so, because of what he perceived to be the truth at the time. So I got home and I took it into my own hands, and I actually rang the club up and I said, if possible, can I please have Roy's home number? So fortunately, I was given it. So I rang up, and as I'm ringing, like I say, I'm only maybe 18 years of age at the time. I've got my phone in my hand and I'm just not knowing what to expect. And his wife answered the phone, and the first thing she said to me was that he's out walking the dogs. So I was like, right, okay, do you mind if I call back in about 15, 20 minutes? And she was like, yeah, absolutely no problem at all. So I rang back in 15, 20 minutes. And by the way, it's probably the longest 15, 20 minutes of my life, just waiting, the trepidation of what was going to be happening on the other end of the phone. So I rang him, and this time he answered, and I was fully expecting for him to, really go off at me. And it was the complete opposite. He just said to me, he said, Danny, listen, he said, what's the situation? He said, have you got an agent? Have you got somebody that's been getting in touch with Diodora to get the boots? And I said, no. I said, you've always said to me, you will give me your boots. We don't need an agent. And he said, Danny, he said, you're doing well in the game. He said, as you quite rightly said, I will give you your boots, but you don't need an agent at this present time. And it was just unbelievable to have that chat with him, because people always talk about Roy Keane being this fiery competitor. Obviously, I had him as a manager at Sunderland, and that is 100% true. But there's also another side to him as well. He's a very, very intelligent individual. And that bit of advice that he gave me on the phone, albeit, there was no truth in the fact that somebody had rung Diodora on my behalf, it just really set me in good stead for the future. And then I made my full debut alongside him. And I never forget, I just wanted to get the first touch of the ball. It was at Old Trafford, obviously the team that I've supported all my life. And there was a 50-50 with Emile Heskey, who was obviously one of Leicester City's main players at the time. And I just got there just before him, and I got the ball and I passed it off maybe to Roy or whoever it was in midfield. And he just looked at me and gave me a stare. And I just thought to myself, I wonder why that is, because I was absolutely delighted I'd got my first touch. And when there was a breaking play, he came up to me and he said, you had an opportunity there to leave your marker, to let him know that he was in the game this afternoon. And it's something that was so true, and it was another very valuable early lesson for me, something that I understood as time went by and I got more experienced in the game. So, having him in that position as well as a teammate for very few games, but it was an absolute privilege.
There's an element of old school about him.
Yeah.
Has that part of the game disappeared now? Has it become a little bit too vanilla, or are there still Roy Keane type characters able to play the game?
I think, unfortunately, they are very few and far between. I think the way that football is now, if you speak to a manager now, the biggest trait that they have to have in their favour is man management skills.
Yeah.
Because when I was playing, obviously when Roy Keane was playing a little bit before my time, you could go in and you could speak to players and you could have a go at them to get the best out of them. I found towards the end of my career that a manager would have to say certain things to a certain individual to get the best out of them. At Stoke City under Tony Pulis, he would give you a wink on the way into the dressing room, because if you were sat next to somebody that he didn't believe could probably take criticism, he would give you that little bit of a wink and a nod at halftime when you were going into the dressing room. You could be playing brilliant, you could have scored a hat-trick, you could be the best player on the pitch. It didn't matter. If you were sat next to a player that he didn't believe could take the criticism, he would go at you and he would have a huge go at you. But every now and then, he'd just look to the side and look at the player that he actually wanted to give the criticism to, as if to say, yes, I'm not talking to you, but you just be aware of this as well. And I think that's one of the things that managers don't get credit for now. The man management skills are absolutely imperative because there's so many different characters within the game.
Give me a tale from inside the dressing room at Sunderland when Keane lost it.
The thing was with Roy is that in the dressing room, he didn't have to lose it. He could get his message across by just speaking to you, by just getting it through to you. And that's just exactly the way that he was. I remember.
Did he manage by fear?
You could say that a certain extent we'll probably say that he managed by fear, but I don't ever look at that. I honestly believe when you look at his time at Sunderland, in particular the first year in the Premier League, he stabilised the club in the Premier League, and he doesn't get the credit he deserves for that. But I remember, I think it was the second season that I was at Sunderland. I was about to leave and I was about to join Stoke City. Our first game of the season, I believe, or second game of the season, we were playing Tottenham Hotspur away, and we'd signed Pascal Chimbonda, who was obviously a big money signing at the time, one of Roy's signings in the summer. And we had Carlos Edwards, who was a Sunderland legend. And we went out for a walk just before we had our lunch. And Pascal and Carlos, they were late for the walk. So we had the walk and then we sat down for the team meeting, and he just looked at them both and he said, listen, you're not playing today. You're not even going to be involved today. Regardless of whether Pascal Chimbonda was a big money signing, or whether Carlos was obviously, like I say, a Sunderland legend at the time. He just looked and said, you're not going to be involved today. If I can't trust you to turn up on time when we go for our walk, how can I trust you at 3 o'clock a game at Tottenham? And that was something that I loved about Roy Keane, is that he didn't care who you were. He didn't care how much you'd cost. He didn't care how well you played the previous week. If you didn't do what was expected of you throughout the week, you wouldn't play the weekend. And that was something that I'm sure that he took from Sir Alex Ferguson and Manchester United as well.
Let's end with one word to describe Roy Keane. On you go.
Oh, incredible.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.